Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start legitimation and obligation, Unit 12, and our topic is legitimation and obligation crisis. No system is free from crisis. The crises occur because of one factor or the other. Because of crisis, problems with regard to legitimation and obligation spring up. Legitimacy of the government is put to question and obligation to obey the government comes to be overhurdled. Crises, whether they relate to challenging the legitimacy of the government or people's obligation to obedience to its own law, arise not because of accidental changes in the environment, but because of, as Lorgan Husman says, structurally inherent system imperative that are incompatible and cannot be hierarchically integrated. Referring to the crisis in the advanced capitalist societies, Habermas holds the view that these societies experience four levels of crisis: economic crisis, rationality crisis, legitimation crisis, and motivational crisis. He says it maintains that advanced capitalist societies are in danger from at least one of the possible crisis tendencies. It is a consequence of the fundamental contradiction of the capitalist system that, other factors being equal, either the economic system does not produce the requisite quantity of consumable values or the administrative system does not produce the requisite quantity of rational decisions, or the legitimation system does not provide the requisite quantity of the generalized motivations, or the social cultural system does not generate the requisite quantity of action motivating meaning. It is not necessary, Hermas states, that these crises may lead to a revolutionary rupture in the system. Referring to the legitimation and obligation crisis in the post-Second World War years, David Held gives contrasting account of the crisis of the state, overloaded state theory on one hand and legitimation crisis theory on the other. The former theory arguing from the pluralist premises, the later theory arguing from the Marxist premises. Now let us move to the next point, that is the overloaded government theory analyzed. The overloaded government theorists characterize power relations in terms of fragmentation. According to them, power is shared and bartered by numerous groups representing diverse and compelling interests. In a pluralist society, the political outcomes thus are determined by democratic processes and pressures, the state attempting to mediate and adjudicate between demands. The economy following the post-war period, while generating mass influence and general prosperity owing to booms in consumer goods, new housing, spread of television and entertainment industries raised expectation in all fields and for all the sections of society. The politician and political parties, in order to secure maximum votes, promise more than they can ever deliver, but promising to deliver contradictory and therefore impossible sets of demands, there is a continuous and constant competition among the political parties, leading ultimately to a spiral form of ever greater promises. Such pluralistic society pursuing democratic values through fabulous material promises made to the people in return of their support in political arena work through political parties which follow strategies of appeasement. They do so because they do not want to risk their support. They do so for fear of losing future votes. Political parties attempt to avoid strict action in any field. They do not make promises to set the economy on the right path, nor they seek the enforcement of radical steps. Appeasement strategies prevail everywhere. In administration, more state agencies relating to health, education, industrial relations, prices, and incomes increase in unwieldy proportions. Bureaucracies develop while often fail to meet the ends for which they were originally designed. The state in pluralistic society proves a failure in providing a firm and effective management. It is unable to meet the cost of its programs, which it designs to meet the ever increasing expectations of its people in order to obtain their vote. It is unable to arrest inflation, for its public spending processes never stop. Consequently, as the state expands, it destroys progressively the realms of individual initiative, where the space for free and private enterprise is lost. Democracy in pluralistic societies becomes only a mechanism and in the process loses its humanitarian value. The state becomes incapable of managing public affairs effectively. It becomes rather an instrument in the hands of powerful economic organized groups and in the process loses its role of providing an impartial and effective administration. The individual becomes sovereign, but only in the theoretical sense of the term. Freedom becomes a set of liberties without any base of equality. The legitimation of the government in pluralistic society causes to be questioned. The obligation on the part of the people to obey the state comes under cloud. A firm and decisive political leadership, among other things, which is less responsive to democratic pressures and demands, may provide solace. Now let us move to the next point, the legitimation crisis theory analyzed. In contrast to the theory of overloaded government, the legitimation crisis theorists starting from the Marxist first argue that while political parties compete for office in the pluralistic societies through the formal rules of democratic and representative processes. Their power is severely constrained by the state's dependence on resources generated by private capital accumulations. The economy is so organized that there is a private appropriation of resources for the things socially produced. Production is organized for profit maximization. Such an economy, the legitimation crisis theorists say, is unstable, where the economic growth is usually and constantly disrupted by crises. The state under such a system of economy cannot develop adequate policy strategies, resulting in the pattern of continuous change and breakdown in government policy and planning. For Habermas and office, there is the rationality crisis or a crisis of rational administration. The conservative government is unable to reduce its cost and spending for fear of trade unions. The Labour government is unable to pursue strong socialist policies for fear of the capitalist organizations to thwart its economic programs. The state works within the limitations of the planning and control politicization of the people stimulating greater demands on the state, as these demands are not usually met, for the system does not permit, so that generosity, legitimation, and motivation crises grow up and struggles follow thereafter. The crises and strategies so grown require extensive stiff intervention, while the principal concerns of the state aim at sustaining and, if possible, strengthening the capitalist economy and managing class antagonisms. It seeks to ensure the support of powerful groups, both the business community and trade unions. The state, in order to avoid crises, both economic and political, takes up the area of the economic and civil society. It also expands the administrative structures, complexities increase, so increases the need for cooperation and the expanding economy. The state has to increase its finances so as to be able to meet the ever growing expectations of the people. Finance comes up through taxation or through loans from the capital markets, which in turn interferes in economic growth. The permanent inflation process never ends. Crisis in the public finance never ends. The system is always under stress and strain. Legitimacy causes to be doubted and obligation is always at stake. David Held finds some common thread in both the theories, overloaded government thesis and the legitimation crisis argument. The common thread is that both the theories find in governmental power a capacity for effective political action. Both hold the view that the state power depends ultimately on the acceptance of the authority of the state. Overloaded theorists or on legitimation crisis theorists. Both the theorists confer that the state power is being progressively eroded. The state is becoming increasingly ineffective or short on rationality. Both the theorists agree that the state power is being undermined because its authority or legitimacy is declining progressively, thus putting a premium on the part of the people's obligation to obey the state. Now let us sum up the unit. Legitimation and obligation are two related concepts. Both strengthen the claims of each other. Legitimation as a concept meaning something that is lawful implies the legalized pattern of state activities accepted so by the citizens constituting it. It admits lawful authority empowered to exercise power, and more than that, the exercise of power is legitimate, legitimately authorized. It, in the context of the state, demands compliance from the people. When the power of the state is accepted by the people, there is no crisis of legitimation. The crisis arises when the power of the state exercised as it is challenged by the people or part thereof. Obligation means the act of binding oneself. It, to a great degree, implies a duty. To be obliged means to have a duty. It is an act of binding oneself to some duty. It may well be characterized as a situation of a rational relationship, an authority on the one hand with assured rights over the individuals on the other agreeing to obeying the laws of such an authority. Obligation in the context of state becomes a political obligation. Obligation and legitimation, the two concepts, have captured the attention of political philosophers from times immemorial. Paternalism, traditionalism, the contract and context theories have been offered to provide the basis of the legitimacy of the government, right to rule the people together with the obligation of the people to obey the government. All systems experience problems of crisis relating to the legitimation and obligation. No system, in fact, is free from the crisis at one time or the other, with one factor or the several factors responsible for such crises. Crises occur whether it relate to the challenging the legitimacy of the government or people's obligation to obey the laws of the state, not because of the casual or accidental changes in the environment, but because of the structurally inherent system imperatives that are incompatible and cannot be hierarchically integrated. Habermas says that such societies experience four levels of crisis: economic, rationality, legitimation, and motivation. Here we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.